Jason Tierney, and I want to welcome you to tonight's webinar, part two of our direct-to-consumer oral appliance therapy discussion. Our first session was a little contentious. We brought aboard some different guests to continue the discussion. Many of you submitted questions when you registered, and we tried to incorporate a lot of those to help guide tonight's discussion. I want to ask you to please submit your questions down in the bottom. We'll try to get to them as we go through, kind of answer them organically, weave them into the conversation. Uh, Tonight, typically Elias is behind the scenes, kind of running that dialogue, but his daughter graduated from eighth grade tonight. So everyone give a shout out to Tessa for graduating. And you might notice that I don't have my typical background. I am in Germany, where it is 2 a.m. right now. So bear with me if I've got some bags under my eyes that are a little heavier than normal. But again, hot topic. One thing that I want to mention is that many of you, your questions that were submitted were actually not centered on direct to consumer oral appliances that we'll be discussing tonight. They were centered on uh, over the counter appliances like boil and bite devices. So, one of the things that we're going to do in a second here is ensure that we're all speaking the same language. We all have sort of a same base foundational knowledge. Um, Before we do that, though, I want to take a moment to introduce our esteemed panelists who are willing to share their time, experience, and knowledge with us tonight. So, uh, Dave, who are you and why are you here talking about this tonight?
That's me. Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me again, Jason. Just want to give some feedback from American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine angle, being faculty and New Jersey Sleep Society board member. I deal a lot with sleep. I'm doing this for a lot of years, and just wanted to enlighten attendees on some things to think about when they come up against this particular paradigm that's occurring right now. So, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thanks for being here, Dave. And then we've got a new face on the webinar tonight. Dr. Rush, you want to tell them who you are and why you're here tonight?
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Third generation dentist based out of Southern California. Mom, dad, brother, sister, everyone's dentistry. I run a company that is dentistry's last line of defense against direct to consumer. We have uh, we've been around for about 7 years, roughly 500 dentists across the United States, and we have certain components of what we call consumer initiated, but always do everything with dentists involved and uh, try to oppose direct to consumer companies in dentistry as vehemently as possible.
Excellent. And what's the name of the company?
My company is called Dentulu,
Oh,
Dentulu, Dentulu.
perfect. Thanks for joining us tonight. And then the man, the myth, the legend, Scott Craig.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Scott Craig, I'm out of Chicago, Illinois. We have 6 locations that treat patients with snoring and sleep apnea exclusively. I've been doing dental sleep medicine for nearly 20 years now. We've treated over 20,000 patients, so I have a lot of experience in the dental sleep medicine space, and hope to share my perspective when it comes to the various models that are out there, and like Dave said, some of the things to keep in mind and consider as more and more patients sort of find their way through these various models and potentially find their way to your practice.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here. I know there's a million other things you could be doing tonight. So the fact that you've committed your time to share so openly tonight is much appreciated. And thanks to all of you that are here with us tonight. Uh, your dedication to your patients, to your practices, and to the dental sleep profession is truly laudable. So thank you. Uh, and for the couple of you that are here just for free CE, I'll mention to you that at the end of tonight's session, you'll receive a survey. Complete that survey. Hang on with us till the end. Complete that survey, and you will receive an email in the next 48 hours. That email will contain a link to a recording of tonight's session as well as your CE certificate. So hang on till the end, complete that survey, and you'll get your CE certificate in the next 48 hours. Scott, you gave a hell of a presentation or led a hell of a dialogue at this year's AADSM, and you also put together this matrix. As I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of people sort of misunderstood that we were talking about over-the-counter devices. This is very different. So you put this together, and if you wouldn't mind just briefly summarizing, kind of each of these different models and comparing and contrasting them. And this will serve as a great basis for the rest of tonight's discussion. So, Scott, the baton is yours. Run, run.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of questions that, like you said, that stemmed more that were more related to over-the-counter devices that are more boil and bite. So I wanted to kind of outline sort of five of the various models that I've seen over the years and that are sort of forthcoming, and then discuss some of the key components of dental sleep medicine and what you typically see in these models. It's not all encompassing. There's obviously a lot of variation that goes on, but you tend to see some of these basic components in the various models. So, one, we're talking about custom-made oral appliances. So devices that are, E0486 PDAC approved or K1027 appliances. So in all of these models, we're talking about a custom-made oral appliance. We're talking about some of the key components that you see in like your standard dental sleep medicine practice would be those custom appliances, the licensed dentist. You're going to have direct dental supervision in a standard dental sleep medicine practice, comprehensive dental eval, imaging and interp by the dentist. The bite registration is going to be handled by that dentist. The impression itself would be handled by the dentist. They would not typically be doing any type of self-impression. The delivery would be done by the dentist or their staff. It would be in-person dental follow-up rather than virtual follow-up or teledentistry. You would see that device typically billed to medical insurance with dental sleep medicine. Obviously, there's fee-for-service practices out there as well, but traditionally, most practices that are focused on dental sleep medicine are billing medical insurance, and it would be billed by the dentist and the dental practice rather than another entity. In the direct-to-consumer approach, you may have some variation. There may not be a licensed dentist involved at all. The supervision by a dentist, if they're involved, tends to be more general. They're not in the building. They're not doing comprehensive dental evals. It's usually all remote. So no dental imaging and interp, no bite registration by the dentist, no dental impression by the dentist. The delivery may or may not have dental involvement, but the key thing in direct-to-consumer approaches is you typically see a patient self-impression, and you and that device can be billed to insurance. It's not always. You see some cash models, and you also see devices that are billed to the payer at full fee. There's also practices out there that are partnering up with physicians, and it's more of a management service arrangement where the practice is providing some dental oversight to check the box that a licensed dentist is involved. And you have, some models where physicians are providing dental sleep medicine in-house. They're billing these custom devices to insurance. And there's no dentist involved whatsoever. So, no comprehensive dental evaluation by a dentist, no impression component done by the dentist, no dental oversight whatsoever. And then you have other models where physicians are employing the dentist and there is direct dental oversight, but it is a physician-owned practice. Typically, you don't see any dental imaging in those practices because they don't typically have that equipment. You don't typically see self-impressions in those models. And it's obviously not billed by the dentist, it's billed by the physician group practice. So there are variations in how dental sleep medicine is done, and hopefully this provides some guidance for the conversation.
Excellent. Thanks for walking us through that. Arash, is there anything that you want to kind of add to this model? Anything that's missing, a box or a row,
Yeah,
column?
there's a whole row which I would put next to direct to consumer, which would be consumer initiated. I mean, by definition, direct to consumer actually doesn't have licensed dentists involved, and it's 100% circumventing dentists. And so that is the main difference between direct to consumer and consumer initiated care. So the only thing I would really change here is under direct to consumer, I would remove that checkbox next to licensed dentist. Uh, Direct to consumer, I think by definition would be circumvention of licensed dentists and just going straight to the patient without any dental oversight. So I would add consumer initiated where a consumer can start a request, but it still goes to a dentist who will be supervising and overseeing the treatment.
Well, I want to push back on that a little bit. Let's and I didn't mention we've got my buddy Chad from Kairos Talks running the background for us tonight. So Chad, if you wouldn't mind rolling to this first question. Uh, so I have some pals that work for some of these direct to consumer companies, and sort of a common refrain amongst them is that dental sleep medicine workflows are full of hoops and hurdles, and 80% of patients of apnix, millions, tens of millions of people, are undiagnosed and untreated. So what they're really trying to do is they're trying to streamline the processes and get more of those patients treated. Um, what's wrong with that? I mean, yeah, what's wrong with that? Uh, Dave?
What's wrong with that is we don't know the quality. Quantity is one thing. And again, hey, we have a model, we can take away 70% of your cancer and leave 30% in there just to get to you. Is that answer the question of, to the end point of properly treating a patient? I'd rather not treat a patient than treat them wrongly, because unlike these aligners of past, if they don't quite fix the crooked teeth enough, they don't go into AFib or they don't have a stroke. This has serious consequences. Again, this is a medical diagnosis that has serious ramifications in one's life. So to say under the guise is we're going to fix more or treat more people, have access to more people with an inferior, possibly appliance that might make things worse before better, I'm not sure that I could follow that guideline to say more is better. I think better is better. That's my point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Better is better. Some of these companies, though, they also posit that they want to have dentists involved. They want dentists to be, let's say, for example, some of these companies fund large scale consumer marketing campaigns. So it's an area where many of us have said we wish the AADSM would do something like this. They've actually put the money into funding some of these initiatives, and then they say we could funnel these patients to dentists. All we need them to do is take a scan and deliver a device. But dentists want too much money for that. I mean, how would you respond to that, Arash?
So I think that at the end of the day, I mean, if we're going to do first no harm to patients, and you have licensed dentists who have taken an oath to do whatever's in the best interest of the patients, even even if it means making less money, um, that is the standard that we should hold, right? No matter what. If the business model is not conducive to that workflow, then and we just don't do it. Dentists want too much money is not an excuse to circumvent them, right? There's got to be a middle ground here where we have to have some standard of care that we just won't compromise. And so in this situation, if you cannot if you cannot find enough dentists to provide this service, then it is not something that we should adopt. And it's something that we should vehemently try to oppose as a industry.
And
Hmm.
if I may add,
Hmm.
Jason, spend the money
Hmm.
to get them trained then. If you want more dentists, they can't take a 1 day course and again treat a condition that kills people, right? So if you say you want more dentists and you're all in that huge budget you're talking about as far as advertising, take a piece of it and say, look, I'm going to pick a bunch of dentists who are committed to going and getting educated, and then we will send you the patients, right? It's not just sign people up and you're for a lesser amount. We're talking about education here. We're working under the prescription of a medical doctor. We have to have standards, minimum standards, right? They're entrusting their patients' lives with our therapy. We cannot just say we're handing a bunch of patients here who wants to do it for a certain amount of money, the scans and the follow-up and the titration, right? That's not a standard we're holding ourselves to in the light of this collaboration with the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine, right? There are standards. We've worked so hard to gain their trust and quality, and now we're usurping that and undermining it by these other pathways that are giving oral appliances and some of these companies and bringing all of oral appliance therapy down with it. And we can't stand for that, unfortunately.
And I just want to add something to that, so just real quick. That notion that there aren't enough dentists who want to participate is just flat out not true. That has not been our experience at all at Dentulu. We have an overwhelming amount of dentists who actually want to get involved. And the way the premise of this question is to have a patient go to a dental office, take a scan, and then have someone else figure out everything else that's involved, and then just send something back to the dentist and have them put it inside the patient's mouth. Well, my question would be, well, we can find plenty of dentists who'd be happy to do that. If that's all about scanning and just delivering something, and you're going to pay them 5, 6, 700 bucks, I assure you there's going to be an overwhelming positive response to dentists who want to get involved in that. The question is, who's actually dealing with the middle work? Is it someone who's trained? Is it someone who's able to differentiate what type of appliance best serves that patient? Is this someone who's going to be able to determine at some point if this patient is not a good candidate? And so that's where the magic happens, is everywhere in between. It's not about taking a scan and just putting an appliance in someone's mouth. It's about figuring out everything else in the middle. And that's why at Dentulu we have to have by our standards someone who is extremely knowledgeable and who's going to be able to assess each and every patient to determine if that patient is a good candidate and suitable and know not when not to treat, right? So just wanted to add that caveat.
So, what about if we can go to this next question? Scott, you and I have had some conversations where you've mentioned uh, some seeing some of these patients in your practices where they've gone through treatment with uh, w- one of the models in that matrix, other than kind of the traditional dental sleep practice, and they've shown up and they've got issues, um, and don't know what to do, but they've ended up in your office. So, I mean, if you could just give us, of course, not violating HIPAA or anything, but just give us a quick example of maybe kind of what happened, and what do you do? What should the dentists in those situations do when they encounter a patient where that's happened?
It's a tough call. I mean, many of these patients show up in our practice and, I would say that they've been stripped of their medical benefit by a company that takes advantage of them. I mean, that company's capable of billing E0486 or K1027 for a custom appliance, but they leave the patient in the lurch after that. And the patient shows up, at our door needing, help with their treatment. And it's hard to help them. We're not going to get reimbursed for, taking on their care. We take on the liability of that patient moving forward. They may have already had side effects as a result of wearing a subpar treatment. It's tough. I mean, those patients frequently are referred by our referring physicians, and our referring physicians are asking us to help. So, you're taking on that patient with just an office visit, or you're starting over from scratch. And if you're starting over from scratch, again, they have no more benefits left. So you're charging them, some self-pay amount that maybe they can or cannot afford. So it's a challenge.
And
Dave?
maybe we need a lot of these adjustments to go back to the company and make more complaints, right? As I was talking to somebody recently, I looked up in the mod database of the FDA, and 99.5% of the complaints in the year of 2024 were from these cheap appliances that one of these manufacturer uses, right? They're causing cheek issues. They're causing reactions. They're too bulky. They're destroying gum tissue. They're pulling restorations, crowns, bridges off of patients' teeth. I mean, some of these appliances are literally, I don't even know how they get approved for Medicare, but they're literally heat suck downs like you would make a night guard or a bleaching tray. And they block out the undercuts of the patient's interdental or intertooth spaces and underneath pontics with wax. I tried to order one myself. I couldn't get it off the model when I snapped it on. So now what's the patient going to do? They're going to try it and it doesn't fit. Go to your dentist. What's the dentist going to do? Hey, company, are you going to reimburse me $100 for this visit for me to adjust this? And then the patient's going to go complain this appliance you send me. And I guess the more of the complaints that goes, maybe That's what helps chop them down at the knees a little bit to realize that this cannot be telemedicine done. This has to be in person, medical grade appliances, right? We're charging medical grade fees. It's a medical diagnosis. Why are we settling for bulky, improperly fitting, hard to adjust by a senior citizen type of appliances just to save some money? In the long run, we're not saving money. We might be worsening their condition with the bulky appliance. So all these things have not been complained to by the FDA, but I'm sure as the mod database keeps acquiring these, at some point that will have to have some type of effect on leadership.
Yeah, so I spoke with someone at one of these direct consumer companies, and they mentioned that they weren't using the device that you're referring to here, uh, but they said that they were prescribing uh, some of the more premium precision devices, if you will, um, and the your dental sleep colleagues applied pressure to that company and said, we're going to stop sending cases to you if you keep doing work for that company. And that company or that manufacturer then ceased to work with them. I mean, so it sounds like some of these companies are actually making an attempt to use top grade devices, the same that everybody on this call would be using. Um, I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, I've spoken to three CEOs and they checked boxes. Historically, it might have ordered a couple, but at the same point, if they don't have dentists supervised with level of
Mhm.
training, a lot of these oral appliance companies don't want to work in reverse because they know they're bringing the quality of their device down. Because if that patient goes to their doctors and said, this device is ill-fitting and not fitting right or hurting me, that brings the device down when actually in the hands of the improper dentist fitting, scanning, poor impression, direct-to-consumer impression with pools means an ill-fitting. So you're only as good as your weakest part in this link of dental sleep medicine, right? So if the
Yeah.
appliance is hurting or causing problems, then it's not going to work.
Well, let's talk about impressions for a moment. So in a past life, I actually worked in a dental lab, and I remember there was one project we worked on where we actually had neurologists, assistants taking impressions for a device that we were working on. And seldom could you even tell that they were impressions of teeth. So, you've got issues with impressions from, an upstart assistant in the office. How can how is it fathomable that Jill or Jane Doe or Jim Doe or John Doe would be able to use a self-impression putty kit and take an accurate impression. Uh, Dave, help me out here.
I mean, senior citizens, where if you talk about 65 and older for PDAC approved appliances, I mean, taking a self-impression kit without seeing if a particular bridge has a big gap underneath it due to recession, and the impression material locks in there, and the patient, God forbid, aspirates, or sits at cockeyed. Again, you're only as good as your weakest part. And I've talked to many labs who do scans and still take impressions, and 99% of the problem cases are ones that are made with impressions, and that's from the dental office. Before we even get into the inferiority of a senior citizen or anybody else taking impressions, this is not the 20-something-year-olds for clear aligners anymore, right? Those people are a little bit more savvy and they don't have as much issues going on with their teeth, so it's more likely to get a quality impression for an aligner from a 20-something-year-old scent, which would be closer, as opposed to something that a senior or somebody older who has more dental issues could run into an issue. And that's before we even get into the bite, right? The bite is so important. The midlines have to be on. How much protrusion are we starting at? The randomness to this is so difficult that, the patients then might take a wrong protrusion, and we're starting the patient at 75% protrusion, and they all of a sudden say, oh, these things hurt too much, I hate them. And then bad news gets around, and then they go back to talk to their doctor. So I see nothing good, again, coming from self-impression kits.
Yeah, that's a question that was going to come up later. We've got a slide for it, but let's talk about it now. For patients, I mean, so a patient has a negative experience, right? They potentially tell a physician, they tell their friend, they tell Google, whatever it might be. Does all of this potentially just leave a stain, a black mark on oral appliance therapy as a whole?
No, not at all. Look, we're making a lot of assumptions here, and so I actually disagree with a lot of the statements that have been made. Just in this first and
Well,
first,
let's hear it.
yeah. First of all, uh, there's about 1% of all dentists that are trained AADSM, if they're even trained by AADSM, dental sleep providers, right? So about 99% of dentists are not trained. But you have all these companies, including all of those labs that you mentioned, who are trying to get more of these guys to participate. So this notion that these guys are doing anything other than wanting to sell more of their appliances is just not truthful. So the fact that people pressured them not to sell to companies who are trying to use good appliances, I think is actually doing a disservice to those patients who are receiving the care. So that's the first part. Second of all, as a profession, we have to get comfortable that dentistry is going to expand beyond the brick and mortar. We cannot limit all of dentistry to a brick and mortar location. And when we don't adapt and evolve, um, and expand to what what consumers are looking for, and what the current day's technology allows, then what we do is we actually create opportunities for direct to consumer companies because the consumer demand is there. It's a matter of whether us as a profession are going to expand and reach patients with new technologies and new innovations that can help actually improve care. It can improve not only the quality of care, but convenience and affordability. So we as a profession, we as dentists have to get comfortable that there is going to be dentistry being performed outside of our brick and mortar offices. And honestly, that's the way it used to be. We used to take care to where patients were located. 100 years ago, we used to go to the patients' homes. Dentists and doctors used to visit their patients at home. And now we've kind of bottlenecked all of care. Everything has to be done in a brick and mortar setting. That's just not true. So when it comes to impressions, I could care less if they take a self-impression. I have no problem with anyone taking a self-impression as long as the impression is good. At our company, we've done 20,000 20,000 stay plates. And all 20,000 of those were done under the direct supervision of a dentist, and all 20,000 included self-impression kits. That we have no issues with people taking good impressions. And not all the patients who have sleep apnea are geriatric seniors who don't have manual dexterity and have undercuts. This is what we mean by proper case selection, having things done under the care of licensed dentists, making it convenient for a certain subset of patients that are appropriate to receive this care, and then those who aren't go get inside, in-person care. So we can't have these like walls up and say self-impressions at home are never good enough because they are. And we can't say that everything has to be done and delivered and every single part of this journey has to be done in a dental office because it doesn't. And the last thing I want to mention is that when when there's no licensed dentist involved at all, that's the most dangerous part. Because at least dentists don't want to lose their license, right?
Yeah,
So
well, let me pause you there. I mean, licensed dentist involvement. I mean, that seems like a loose term, and we can harken back to the Matrix in the beginning of this, but then I feel like we're in the Matrix. So when I mean a licensed dentist's involvement, you've got to define involvement. If that means uh, 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 looking at a scan and saying, yeah, it's fine, make the device, or that means uh, looking at a scan of a self impression. When the self impression when the arches arrive at the manufacturing facility. I mean, that's dentist involvement. That's dentist oversight, right? Is that sufficient? Because I'm sure you can give me a case study where that would be that would be the only option. But I mean that's certainly not desirable when there are other options.
desirable. I mean, a lot of things aren't desirable, but
Uh,
is a dentist willing to put their license at jeopardy? Do they have, are they willing to lose their license and go to court and deal with a malpractice claim? Um, if they feel like they have achieved the standard of care, and they're going to put their license up at risk, then yeah, it doesn't matter to what extent they do. There's an autonomy that dentists practice with. It's one of the amazing things about our profession is that we have some level of autonomy to practice at a standard of care we believe is best. And when we don't meet those expectations, that's when you get reprimanded. And so that's kind of just the nature of our profession.
If I
Scott, you
may
want to add
add,
something to that? Scott's been silent and he's turning red.
Um, no, I mean, there's a lot there that I don't disagree with. I don't think that dental sleep medicine will remain in a brick and mortar facility, in every component of providing that care. That being said, I think there are things I would highly disagree with, and I think I would draw the line at a patient self-impression. I mean, if you have a self-impression kit that a dentist is overseeing directly, I would not have an issue with that. But a patient self-impressing, for all the reasons that Dr. Federici mentioned, that is a very bad idea. I can tell you, after treating 20,000 people with an oral appliance, that's a massive oversimplification of what it is that we're doing on a day-to-day basis with respect to the impression. And this is not direct to consumer, orthodontic care with an aligner. This is something someone's going to wear for the rest of their life. The forces on the teeth are far greater than ortho, and the likelihood of side effects is extremely high. Most patients will have some type of tooth movement. That tooth movement is progressive in nature. It's going to get worse. So they need close monitoring, and that monitoring theoretically should have the ability to be in-person monitoring if necessary. So, I mean, I think that there's a successful model that has a teledentistry component to it, a telemedicine component to it, telefollow-up, maybe some teledelivery when necessary. I think these things can be done as long as there is, dental oversight. And I think as long as you have a location that a patient can get to provide care with appropriately trained staff that have been highly trained in dental sleep medicine. And outside of that, I think it's a subpar service. When I'm looking at direct to consumer, first and foremost, I'm looking at the level of oversight, by a dentist. Jason, to your point, like that's a very loose term, and that's why I sort of laid out that graph to sort of indicate all the various services that are done in a traditional dental sleep medicine practice and what's missing in a direct to consumer practice. And it's not just that the consumer initiated the care. There's plenty of direct to consumer companies that have no dentist involvement whatsoever. There's plenty of physician practices that have no dental involvement whatsoever. So I really do believe that it's important to look at what components within the care model that you're going to see have direct dental oversight rather than general oversight by a dentist. Because general oversight by a dentist who knows what's happening behind the curtain? Are they looking at an impression? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. But their license is on that LLC potentially to be able to at least check the box that a dentist is involved. And doctor, with all due respect, I think there are plenty of people that would take the money and risk it. So, and that's evident by every direct to consumer practice that's out there that has a licensed dentist involved, because there's very little oversight with respect to many of these models. And I'll tell you what, I don't want my mother going to those models. I don't want my aunt, my cousin, my nephew, or anyone that has sleep apnea going there, because I'll tell you what, those patients have very significant comorbid conditions that are associated with obstructive sleep apnea. This is not a cosmetic treatment. It's a treatment for something that has significant morbidity associated with it. So I think it needs to be taken very seriously. And at the end of the day, I think the line of demarcation is patient self-impressions for me. And for me, I'll advocate at the payer level to pull that so that no one can bill a custom mandibular advancement device to a payer if sorry, I lost my train of thought there. They can't bill it to a payer if it was a patient self-impression kit. That's a massive quality difference.
If you have perfect impressions coming out, let me ask you a question. Is your problem with the impression kit itself, or is the problem with the non-dentist taking an impression?
The problem is that there's a series of different issues that I just laid out in terms of side effects and so forth. And the beginning of the treatment requires an excellent dental impression. And the best dental impression is from a digital intraoral scanner, not PVS.
I disagree with that. But the
science has proven that out by 3Shape and others time and time again. So let's go with the highest quality and start at a level of quality care.
Well, hold on a second. So let me ask you a question. If I were to tell you that a patient can take a scan at home without using a traditional impression tray, what would that be any better for you?
Well, I'd have to see the literature on it, but yeah, potentially. At this point, I don't know of a scanner that anyone is doing at home.
I do. Yeah, I know of several. So that's the point I'm trying to make is it's not about the impression at all. We're getting good impressions. We're getting good impressions.
How was the bite taken for those devices, Arash?
That's what I wanted to say is we're in a unique procedure here that while the impression is your baseline, the ability to set the protrusion and monitor deviations, because the number one side effect is usually during advancement. And if something is taken wrong at the beginning, you're asking a patient to bite down and they bite like this, and we keep moving the jaw forward as we advance. We're going to create unilateral muscular situations. So while I agree with you, the scanning technology is getting better. Who knows, at some point we may be able to stick things in our mouth and get a good scan, but then you got to follow up the secondary step, which is the key part of our advancement is proper advancement and specific steps. And Scott, I wanted to add something before I forgot, because in the first session, round one with these seminars, the long-term management and the follow-up has to be high-resolution pulse oximetry to see when's our endpoint? Is this patient self-advancing and then we hope they feel better that the treatment is done? Are they getting an efficacy study done after? Do we know how far they're protruding when they feel better, but are we having high resolution pulse oximetry validate that we're done advancing? So there's so many variables. And let's not get hung up on the minutia of the scan. And we all know the importance of that. And I know, Scott, you've done tests on impressions versus digital scans, and it's not even close as far as the remakes and the adjustments. But I think more importantly with this, we have to deal about the patient's best interests in advancement when we've completed it, minimizing side effects. And I think a lot of these things at home are just bringing more of that into play where things can go down the wrong path more often than they would go down the right path. That's my overall summation.
You have like I said, you have tens of millions of people right now that are undiagnosed, right? Actually suffering. Most of them don't even know oral appliances are a solution. They're afraid to get tested because they think CPAP is the only solution, right? And so, crowns fall off, crowns come off with impressions, teeth come out with impressions. You have all these issues that you are purporting happen with direct-to-consumer companies are readily happening in dental offices as well. And so the truth and reality is that you're not seeing any large variability in the type of problems that you're seeing in the dental office with taking impressions, or if someone is taking an impression in a medical office instead of a dental assistant. I mean, most of your dental assistants don't know how to take impressions in the first place. So then let's talk about George gauges, like the type of perfect bite that everyone is expecting. Look, you take it out 100%, you bring it back 50%. I mean, and I'm not
Can we
over
not talk about George Gage's?
and I'm not oversimplifying it, right? That's like what I talked to, and I'm not even an expert in sleep medicine. I'm a surgeon by my background. I was talking to Dave. I said, we got these same scrutinies when dentists started placing implants. It's like everyone has to be an ICOI diplomat, which is the same nonsense that they're saying about everyone has to be an AADSM diplomat. That is just not the truth. That is not the case, and that should not be the standard, or else we're going to continue to have 99% of dentists who are not participating in this, resulting in a huge vacuum, which is direct to consumer companies. When we should have some guidelines that are set by the AADSM that are educating the masses of dentists on how to participate. The lack of standardization that's in dentistry right now is the problem. You
Well,
have
they've put those standards in, and at the end of the day, a patient's self-impression is not the standard. That's the point.
an impression, regardless of who took it, as long as it's done correctly, is the standard. It's not it's a huge protectionism point of view to say that a dentist has to do it. I know dental assistants that take better impressions than dentists. So the point is you have to have a good impression and you have to have a good bite. And so you leave that up to the person who's doing the actual procedure to determine if they have received the proper data points that they need. Now, that person, right, is that someone just running a direct to consumer company? Is it a licensed dentist who gives a shit? Or is it just, or just someone who has a check mark being popped? That's the real question is, are we getting the proper data? Are we getting good impressions? Are you able to titrate? Are you doing the proper follow-ups? And if the answers are yes, they're probably performing better than most GPs that are taking a stab at providing oral appliances.
I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, listen, if there's a dentist that's involved in all of these components, we don't have an issue. I think it's
I agree.
the second the dentist is outside of these components or has very little oversight of what's happening, that's when there's an issue. And that's the whole point, I guess I'm saying with the patient self-impression. We could argue the likelihood of getting a great impression from a patient is going to be far less than a great impression from a trained, qualified dentist. And you look at any of these components, the likelihood that you're going to have quality care without the dentist, involved is highly unlikely.
I think the same standards that we hold, on these types of calls should be the same standards that we hold for dentists working at a DSO. Like someone said, if a dentist is employed by a DTC company and they're providing oversight, what happens if they reject too many cases? Well, right, they're incentivized to approve more cases. I mean, come on, let's just use that same argument in a DSO. Like, do you really think that these dentists are working at most of these DSOs are not pressured or incentivized to perform a type of care that they ordinarily wouldn't in a different type of setting? At the end of the day, that dentist who's providing that oversight, who's providing that check mark, is responsible. If there is a
Yeah.
consistent and scalable,
Wait,
like, yes,
that seemed like a non sequitur to me. I'm not sure that I followed
okay. So
alluding to. I mean, help me out
someone
there.
on the comments
And
said,
actually, Steve just said something similar. Yeah, I
yeah, yeah.
think you kind of
So
lost us,
So the
at
question
least
is,
two of us.
a lot, someone who's like worked their butt off to get a dental license, who's taken an oath to doing something, whatever they do is in the best interest of the patients, who are practicing, as a licensed dentist, has a fiduciary duty to do right by that patient. And if that person is being incentivized to do things that they feel are incorrect, and they continue to do it, that person should have their license taken away. And so people are incentivized in direct to consumer companies. They're also incentivized as an associate in a traditional office and in a DSO. We incentivize dentists all the time. But if that dentist crosses that path and does things that they shouldn't do under pressure, I mean, there's no difference to that dentist working for a direct to consumer company or working for a DSO. You should not use monetary incentives to do things that are going to erode the standard of care and to do things that you couldn't defend in a court of law. So it doesn't really matter if it's a direct to consumer company or it's an associated DSO. Standard of care is standard of care. Do you see the parallel?
Okay. It's n- I still don't, but um, I don't know that we want to spend any more time on that.
Okay.
Anyone? Anything you want to?
No, I think keep going.
No.
We want to get more questions
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let,
Thank you.
let's let's keep going. This is something that was alluded to a couple times, but I want to center on it for a moment. Uh, Orthos do more Invisalign despite GPs doing it, uh, and Smile Direct Club. Uh, so, what is the opportunity for traditional dental sleep practices to sort of leverage the marketing uh, forces of these direct consumer companies? How can you potentially use them to your benefit? Uh, and isn't this just a case of rising tide raising all ships? Uh, is this potentially a boon for practices like yours, Scott?
I mean, if you look at the headwinds in the awareness of patients who have obstructive sleep apnea and the awareness of alternative treatment strategies, sure, that's a boon. The rising tide does lift all boats. I think it's a wonderful thing when you have a dentist down the street that provides a high level of care. It improves everyone. That kind of competition is a positive thing. But when you have, a bad egg down the street that's not doing right by the patient, it's a stain on everyone. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we want to have a high level of care in dental sleep medicine. And I think the academy should do all that they can to ensure that there's a high level of care. And they have done that. They have said specifically that patient self-impressions are not that high level of care. So, going by that's the highest qualified people in dental sleep medicine saying, here's where we're at with the bar. I do think, that these types of initiatives will drive patients our way. I think patients will have questions. I think they'll go into their physician's practice, and those physicians will hopefully refer them to someone, that they trust, that, they know provides a high level of care, that has an excellent reputation. So it certainly can help, but it puts a stain on the whole treatment because there are going to be patients that come in to these offices that say, I was in an oral appliance and here's what happened. Look at the tooth movement. No one followed up with me. Nothing happened. But yet I still paid, my insurance was still billed and it cost $3,500. So, I think it cuts both ways.
And
I'm going to be candid. give me one sec here, Dave. I'm sorry. I'm going to be candid with you guys. I think hmm, it's my opinion that a lot of the forebears of dental sleep medicine um, have adopt defensive posturing oftentimes. And I think to Arash's point, there is a need for disruption and to pretend that it's not coming and just hold on to these sort of antiquated ways of doing things um, is unhealthy. That doesn't mean that these models that we've discussed today are the answer. Dave, what would you say to that? I mean, um, the evolution of the field and um, freeing yourself from some of the constraints of the way that things have been done that can inhibit the patient volume.
Yeah, I mean, we have this rising tide comment, but at the same time, we have board certified diplomates in dental sleep medicine in network charging the same amounts or selling for the same amounts as this direct to consumer. So who are you taking your mother to? Right? So physicians then are writing the scripts for us. This is a very rare scenario we're in here where we need the physicians to write a script for us to allow us, right? They are responsible. We talk about licenses of physicians who are putting their licenses on risk in courts of law, where you sent your patient to somebody who had no clue what they were doing, were supervised under telemedicine, and now they've made an official complaint to the FDA, et cetera. So maybe the negativity will reinforce what the people are doing it right for. Maybe we have some type of happy medium, like Dr. Harkin is saying, is like, let's get more dentists doing it. Let's have minimum standards. Let's get more people treated. But to think that these DTCs are doing it out of the goodness of their hearts to get more patients treated for a fee that's the same as some of our fellow people who worked hard and are doing it at the highest level or charging for it in network, I don't think that's a very even close comparison as far as the quality that patient's going to get.
I would say if you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart, you should volunteer in Guatemala. But none of you guys and no one on this call is doing anything for the goodness of their heart. They're doing things because it's their job and they're making money. And neither are direct to consumer companies. They're not doing anything for the goodness of their heart. That's a volunteer organization. The reality is there are companies that are going to consumers because dentistry is a profession and dental sleep doctors as a profession have bottlenecked access to care for too long. The reality is that there are tens of millions of people who should get HSTs, they should get screened at home. And if they are a candidate, there are certain sub cases that should be done at home and they can be done at home. And that's not limited to oral sleep appliances, that's limited to medicine as well. I mean, 40 years ago, we were shocked if people were checking their own blood glucose at home or checking their own blood pressure at home. Like that should be done under the supervision of a dentist. We're talking about of a physician. That's life and death. So look, if we're pissed off that someone else used their benefit, now we're gonna have to deal with this patient at the office because their benefits have been used up and we won't have access to that 4,500. Now we got to charge lesser fees. I mean, let's keep it real if that's the argument. But the reality is you're gonna have multiple. I mean, the past president of AADSM is running a direct-to-consumer oral appliance company. Like, just think about that. The past president of the AADSM is running a direct-to-consumer oral appliance company. So this is coming, and we as dentists should not stick our heads underneath the sand and say, "Oh, it's impression kits. It's just, if the impression kit is being done by the patient, that's the standard." That's just not realistic. We as a profession need to expand access to more dentists, to more affordability, and AADSM and us as a profession should create certain guidelines that people can follow. Certain subcases may be done at home. Maybe some of these are okay to do at a physician's office, and certain ones have to be sent to ADSM diplomats that can do the advanced cases. But if we don't,
Yeah,
if
real quick, just to be clear, the dentist that we're talking about that co-authored the paper for the ADSM, and one of these the QR code on your right will take you to that paper, the ADSM's position on direct to consumer devices. But he is not the owner of that company. He's not in a leadership role in that with that company, but he does have some involvement with one of those companies. But I just want to clarify that, okay?
He owns
Uh,
equity, right? He has equity in the company.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Okay.
And just to
Yeah.
clarify, the goodness of the heart thing was just being that this company, under the guise of doing the goodness, is lowering their fee to
Yeah,
make it more affordable when we have dentists who are already trained in it, who
I
are
agree.
joining networks to get that. So that's
I
all it
agree
was
with
kind
you,
of,
Dave.
I
I
wasn't
agree.
talking about yeah,
Yeah, we agree on that. I mean,
yeah.
look, we have appliances with a lab fee of $300 to $500 on average, and we're getting reimbursed 35 to 6,000, 7,000. Like, all right, it's not a big deal. Someone comes to your office and you have to work out a payment plan to help them. Like, it's not an issue. The issue is how do we as a profession safeguard tens of millions of people because currently we've bottlenecked the delivery of this care so much so that even the DMEs and all of the HSD companies you guys work with, I mean, everyone's looking for alternative scalable models because what we are doing currently is just not working. And so either we change or we just do direct to consumer models. And by the way, there's nothing you can do about that. People are sending impression kits even without licensed dentists. Go on Amazon, go on eBay. I mean, they're completely circumventing the dentist. So what do we do as a profession? Do we meet somewhere in the middle and treat more patients and at least be involved, or do we just, put our heads in the sand and just cry about it? I mean, that's really what this conversation is about.
So
I
the
think we already
the
established that, ultimately the dentist needs to be involved. And to what extent the dentist needs to be involved has been laid out by the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine. We could sit here and discuss whether we agree with that or disagree with all the different components in there, but I think we all agree that the dentist needs to be involved to a certain degree.
I agree. Yeah,
You
I
know,
agree with that. I agree with that, but I
and
also
and abide by
and
the
if
standard of care.
And if that's the case, the dentist is always going to be the bottleneck. It's not like, you're not going to have a professional involved. You are going to have a professional involved. And if you look at sleep medicine as a whole has been plagued with this forever. At first it was access to care, in terms of getting testing. Then it was home sleep testing to improve that access. So now have more people able to get tested and diagnosed to see if they have sleep apnea. But then you look at the treatment side of the equation. It's not like CPAP doesn't need, a doctor per se. You can go to a DME company that can provide CPAP, but when that's not provided with a significant amount of oversight, those patients are not adherent with that therapy and ultimately discontinue the treatment. So what are we talking about? We want patients at the end of the day to be treated, and we want those patients to be managed by someone, and that someone we've agreed is a dentist.
should be a
So
dentist. It
at the
should
end of the day, there's always going to be a bottleneck. We're not going to be able to treat everyone.
It should be a dentist, Scott. But let me like a couple of years ago, AADSM came out speaking and lobbying against HSTs and home sleep tests, and now you have the entire dental industry advocating for it, and all of you guys probably use it. The reality is, dentistry as a profession has a 7 to 10 year lag on adopting innovations that have come out. So consumers are finding out about and adopting these changes before the actual dental profession is. And so just what the AADSM or some dentists think through the lens in which they're looking doesn't really reflect the reality of what's going on in the world. And so we have to be open to adopting some changes and innovations. And if that means we're getting good impressions with good bites taken outside of the dental office, then so be it.
I'm going to pause everyone there for a moment. We're almost at the hour. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. There's been, much like last time, there's been a lot of questions and comments coming through. If you all are amenable panelists to hanging on for another, let's say, 10 minutes, we can go there. But again, it's 3 o'clock here in Germany, 3 a.m. So I don't want to go any longer than that. For those of you that want to stay on for another 10 minutes and continue to be part of the dialogue, we'd love to have you. If you have to go, We totally understand. And just a reminder, you'll get that survey pop up. Complete that. You'll get your C certificate in the next 48 hours via email. Before we jump into back into the conversation, I want to tell everybody we're going to continue with the contentious topics on June 17th, same time. It's Tuesday, 7 p.m. Medical billing updates for dental sleep practices. Be sure to register for that. Again, it's free, and you'll be a better human and so a little bit smarter for it. I also want to invite all of you to the 2026 Transform Dental Sleep Symposium. That's January 30th and 31st. Thank you for the thumbs up there. Here are a few of our speakers. We've got a mix of dentists, physicians, and Michael Cohen. But no, we've got a little bit of everything. We really try to, for those of you that have been there, you know what to expect. If you haven't been there, we really focus on practical information and actionable takeaways. It's not a scientific meeting for you. Those of you that were at the ADSM a couple weeks ago, you know you can get a lot of that there, and that's the place to go for that. This isn't that. This is now I've got all of this information. What do I do with it? How do I actually turn it into treated patients in my practice as efficiently and effectively as possible? So get registered. And Elias is at his kid's graduation, so he doesn't know I'm doing this. You can use a code JT100, my initials JT100. That'll save you $100 on dentist and team tuition until, I don't know, let's call it the end of this month. So it expires the last date of this month. Get registered. It'll sell out, always does. Enough with the commercial. Let's dive back in. Dave, you've got a message to all of the dentists that are on tonight. What is it regarding direct-to-consumer oral appliance therapy?
I think just educating your patients, educating doctors who are your referral sources, saying that these things are coming out. We just want to make you aware. Of course, we're, aware of the cost factor. We want to treat more patients, but not at the sacrifice. I mean, my referring physicians know my strict protocols, and I've already talked to three of them, and they said I would never go down that pathway because only experiencing and hearing from my patients what you do for them is like that's the right place I want them in, because I have a lot of high risk, high comorbidity patients that I just wouldn't feel comfortable knowing that somebody remotely versus hands-on is going to be there to oversee and perfect every step of the way. So again, just encouraging your doctors, making them aware of what's out there so that, again, we all do this the right way.
Yeah, I hear you. That's great, but for, agree with everything you said. But for these companies that are savvy marketers and they're reaching the general public that either doesn't know what sleep apnea is, so maybe their marketing is centered on symptoms, or they know what sleep apnea is, but they've not been tested because, as Arash mentioned, that they're afraid of CPAP, right? Or they think that's the only option. So these patients potentially aren't going to get to that referring physician that's sending patients to you. These are people outside, potentially outside that scope. So, I mean, there are people you're not talking to. There are people that likely aren't talking to your referring physician. So
You're right. It's an awareness campaign, right? They don't know what they don't know, the patients. So I think a lot of effort going forward has to be on the awareness campaign, right? We don't have the money as Inspire does to put $200+ million a year on a national awareness campaign. So hopefully, as more patients get treated, they talk to people. The word of mouth is very important. Getting out and doing health fairs, trying to educate, but again, we're never going to reach all the people that need to be. And that starts with the PCPs, the nurse practitioners, the physician assistants, the annual checkups at doctors' offices, whatever you want to do. There's any contact with the medical profession, we all need to, and you talk about that rising tide, is all levels and all sectors of healthcare really need to contribute to this awareness campaign. It can't be any one entity or one board or one association, right? It's got its tentacles everywhere. So only together, all of us acting, can we make a dent in this.
Scott, what would you add to that, or what would your message be to everyone that's here tonight? A key takeaway for them.
I mean, I don't think that there's an issue with direct consumer marketing. I think that there's an issue with the care that comes after. There's always going to be a bottleneck. I think that, highly successful dental sleep medicine practices are going to have to evolve. They're going to have care outside the brick and mortar location. You're going to need to be able to do some telemedicine services. You're going to have to do those things. And if you do those things, you extend your reach, but you also have to have the ability to have a brick and mortar facility when there are issues that patients can access. So, you know, the access to care issue can be resolved by the providers that are out there now, by reaching out to patients who are, undiagnosed, patients who are undertreated, reaching out to referring physicians, opening up a variety of different services. But people have to also understand that, after 20 years of doing dental sleep medicine, the type of device greatly impacts the kinds of problems and redeliveries that come up within a practice. The type of impression dramatically, affects the type of problems and the kinds and the number of problems and redeliveries that come up with the practice. So, these things are important. They affect the overall care of the patient. And if the device is not comfortable, if the device is creating pain and discomfort, the patient will not continue with therapy. And if they don't continue with therapy, we've gotten nowhere.
Arash?
Um, you know, dental sleep medicine is following the same trajectory dental implants did a decade ago. Dental sleep medicine and providing mandibular advancement devices and therapies is going to become common practice, just not at the current standard of care that is expected by diplomats at AADSM who are like two notches below pulmonologists, right? Like it's great if the entire industry were practicing at that level, but it's just not realistic, and it's gonna change. The lack of standardization that we have in addressing these types of issues in dentistry is the reason why this hasn't scaled. We have tens of millions of patients that could be referred to us, but we don't have any standardization. There's no standard community. Everyone uses a different lab. Some people are, doing billing to varying successes. The reality is these companies that are providing these networks and what we're calling direct to consumer companies are providing a standardization that these referring companies are actually looking for. And so there's got to be some place where we can come meet in the middle, and hopefully we can step out of our comfort zone. I spoke to Dave and several other AADSM, diplomats who agree that there has to be some simpler options for dentists who are not AADSM diplomats and who can get their beaks wet and provide cases safely for the majority of cases. And those that are more challenging and difficult, we send those to specialists and those who have more training. And that's just the reality. Either we can achieve that, or we're just going to have to really suffer by having companies just go direct to the clients and never have dentists involved. Whether it's boil and bite, buying these at retail stores or just sending impression kits. And by the way, impression kits are not going to be here in 3 or 4 years. I mean, there's tons of different companies that have at-home scanning capabilities now. So this whole discussion about like who's taking a PVS impression is not a discussion. It's a matter of do those impressions, whether they were done, by the patient manually or they were done digitally, are we okay with those as long as they're done right? And I don't see that as a good reason to be a bottleneck. So I do want to thank you, Jason, for putting this together. I think that you've been very open in having different perspectives presented, and for anyone who wants to learn more about how we're protecting dentistry against direct-to-consumer companies like Daybreak and others, please feel free to reach out to me. And my company is called Dentulu, and we would love to be able to send you patients and work symbiotically with dentists.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being here and sharing so openly. Uh, I know that the aim of everyone on this panel is truly to help more patients. Is it a business? Sure. Should a business be profitable? Absolutely. So, but I know first and foremost, you just want to help more people. And I appreciate you walking all of our participants through, some of the various ways that different organizations are doing that. I think what we've agreed to is to disagree for now, as Scott predicted. But, you know, dialogue is key. Open minds are paramount. And I think as long as we keep talking, we will work toward the best end together somehow. So, Dave, Arash, Scott, thank you. I really appreciate each of you. I
Thank you.
appreciate your professionalism and your friendship. To all of you that are on with us tonight, thank you so much. And there's a trillion other things you could be doing. So, really, thank you. I hope you learned something today that's thought provoking, maybe a little provocative, and you'll mull it over and make the best decision possible for your patients. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening. We'll
You
see you
too.
at the
Thanks. Safe
next
travels, Jake.
session.
Thanks,
All
Take
right.
guys.
care.
Bye bye.